Welcome back to America's Voice Live. We are going to finish off the show with a bang-up interview with Harvard Law professor of 50 years, now Professor Emeritus, and author of Guilty by Accusation, Alan Dershowitz. Hello, Alan. How are you?
I'm doing great. You?
Wonderful. Okay, I am very excited to talk about your book. I live in Los Angeles. I was in the entertainment industry for 10 years. My husband's an actor, and after the entire Me Too movement, I am amazed at how many people out there who saw folks who were accused of things that they maybe never did, or at least not to the extent that the person claims. And there are still so many people out there who think, well, that had to happen. We had to smear good men to get the pendulum to swing back to the center, which I find to be a disgusting mentality. Talk to us about that with respect to your book and maybe the effort, maybe the improvement it can make in that area.
Well, we have to change what's going on. Today, if you're accused, you're guilty. I was accused. I definitively proved that the woman made up the story. I never met her. We discovered emails which she suppressed, in which she admitted never meeting me. We discovered a manuscript which she suppressed, in which she acknowledged never meeting with me. I have a recorded conversation with her lawyer who says it was impossible for you to have met her and she was wrong, simply wrong. A thorough investigation by the former head of the FBI concluded that there was no basis for the charges against me. We have evidence that this woman has falsely accused Tipper Gore, Al Gore, Bill Clinton, and many other people. And she is a woman with a long record and long history of lying. And yet people still believe it. They didn't believe it when it was first made because that was before the Me Too movement. But once the Me Too movement came in, then every woman had to be believed. And I was accused of attacking women because I called her a liar, which of course she is. And I believe that people who make deliberately false accusations, not people who make a mistake or an accident, people who make deliberately false accusations for money should go to prison, should be prosecuted and charged with crime and should go to prison. And I think the lawyers who put them up to it should be disbarred. And in my book, Guilt by Accusation, I make all of those arguments. And it's an important book to read because it could happen to anybody. If it happened to me, it could happen to your husband, to your son, to your nephew, to your father. It's just impossible to prove innocence these days, even if you have overwhelming evidence that the woman is lying and that you couldn't possibly have been in the same place that she claims to have met you.
Mm-hmm.
Alan, obviously a major issue, especially when you're talking about due process and the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment, as we saw with Justice Kavanaugh last year. But I want to talk about today's issue, and that is this. We have an impeachment of a president taking place right now. At least they're trying to get the articles transferred over to the Senate. And just this morning, Ro Khanna, a representative from the Democrat House, has suggested that he would like to add another article of impeachment for the killing of Soleimani. You suggested the targeted killing of Soleimani was a lawful, proportional, preemptive military action against a combatant enemy who had killed and was planning to kill Americans. See my book, Preemption, A Knife That Cuts Both Ways. Is this hypocrisy that we're seeing from the Democrats right now, who wanted the War Powers Act for President Clinton? They don't seem to want it for this president.
Well, it's worse than hypocrisy. It's a complete double standard. Where were these members of Congress when President Obama correctly killed Osama bin Laden? This case is much stronger than the Osama bin Laden case. Osama bin Laden was a has-been. He was being punished, killed for what he had done in the past, killing so many Americans, and completely justifiably killed. But here we have a person, Soleimani, who has killed many Americans, who is planning to kill more Americans, who's a combatant in uniform, which makes him a completely appropriate target. I challenge any law professor, any academic, any scholar, any member of Congress to distinguish the case of Osama bin Laden from this case. Now, the argument they make is that Osama bin Laden was not the head of a state. He was only the head of a major organization, whereas Soleimani was the deputy or the second head of Iran. First of all, he wasn't. His only official position is as a major general in the Iranian army, which is a completely appropriate target for combat. And second of all, there's no distinction. If you're planning a terrorist attack against the United States and you're the person in charge of doing it, you're a completely legitimate target. And anybody, you can disagree on the merits of whether it was wise or not wise. That's a legitimate debate to have. But anybody who says this was unlawful under either American constitutional law or international law is applying a double standard and being hypocritical and confusing politics with policy and with law.
Alan, I'm hopeful that the American people will start to recognize the hypocrisy of the left. To me, one of the biggest things that I think about is during the Obama administration when they droned a wedding, I believe, in Afghanistan and killed 33 people, 23 of which were children. And the left never had a problem with that. Do you think that going into this next election of 2020 that maybe not necessarily folks on the far left, but middle to left will realize this hypocrisy and maybe get some senses about them and pull the lever for the right?
I don't know about that. I'm a liberal Democrat. I'm speaking as a liberal Democrat who voted for Hillary Clinton. I plan to remain a liberal Democrat. I haven't changed. Just left. As I think it was President Reagan said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. I didn't leave my role as a civil libertarian. And as a liberal, the liberals and the civil libertarians no longer seem to care about civil liberties when it comes to attacking Trump or defending their own people. I hope many more Americans see the hypocrisy and move to the center. I'm looking for a centrist. I want to return to the days when liberals and conservatives would argue with each other. Bill Buckley and I used to argue all the time on his TV show and in the op-ed pages in the newspapers. And then we could talk to each other after we argued about differences in policies. What's happened is the left has moved so much further to the left. And there are elements of the far right, particularly those people at, Charlottesville and others, extremists, have moved so far to the right that dialogue has become impossible. And I'm hoping this next election maybe will restore some dialogue. And Americans shouldn't disagree about actions like the killing of Soleimani or the killing of Osama bin Laden. That's an area we should come to agree upon, because in both cases, the president was trying to protect Americans from terrible, terrible harm by people who want to destroy us.
Alan, your latest book, Guilt by Accusation, it definitely is needed at this time. Previous book that you wrote, The Case Against Impeaching President Trump, I read that you actually wrote that and titled it The Case Impeaching President Clinton, assuming that Hillary Clinton was going to be elected and the Republicans were going to go after her. What do you see right now with impeachment being used as a political tool?
It's a terrible thing. I mean, Hamilton said it would be the worst danger for impeachment to turn not on the guilt of the person being impeached, but upon the number of votes that could be accomplished by either political party. And that's what we're seeing. The House didn't have a basis for impeaching the president. They just had enough votes to do it. And that's wrong. And I hope the Senate will undo that.
Alan, I'm interested in your opinion on something that I guess is kind of a broader issue. You are a liberal Democrat, libertarian. I'm libertarian on a lot of social issues, which is why I have a problem with anything that I perceive to be a states' rights social issue going up to the Supreme Court. Most recent example, obviously, gay marriage that was federalized. What are your thoughts on that? Would you like to see that handled differently in the court system and those types of issues remain within the state?
Gay marriage is the easiest issue around. No state, no government, no city, no state, no federal government, no institution should have the right to tell people who to marry or who to love. It's a simple issue. There's no countervailing consideration on the other side. Abortion is a much more difficult issue, because there you have a very substantial number of Americans who believe the fetus is a live human being. And so you have the right of the woman and the right of the fetus. That's a very difficult issue. Gay rights is the simplest issue imaginable. What is anybody's business? I had lunch today with two friends, a law school classmate who have been married 37 years, two guys. Why should we care? What's the issue? Why should any government, if you're a true libertarian, you say no government, no city, no state, no federal government should be able to intrude into the decision of two men, two women who want to marry. The Bible may have something to say about that, but you're answerable, and the pearly gates are answerable to your church, but you're not answerable to the state if you're a true libertarian.
Well, my issue, and I am libertarian, which is why I don't care if, and in fact in California I did vote in favor of it, my issue was the way in which it happened by going to the Supreme Court.
Well, that's a fair issue. When Roe versus Wade came down, I was not in favor of Roe versus Wade. I was in favor of a woman's right to choose, but I thought the issue of Roe versus Wade should be left to the states. And I think, by the way, we who supported women choose would have won that issue. I think Roe versus Wade was a gift to the Republicans because it basically eliminated what were called in those days Rockefeller Republicans. Remember that the first President Bush was a pro-choice person until Roe versus Wade. Then he says to himself, gee, I don't have to worry about suburban Republicans whose daughters are getting pregnant. Now we have the Supreme Court taking that out of politics, so I can go back to trying to get the evangelical Christians to support me and support pro-life. So there's a big difference between, I agree with you, between your views on the merits of something and your views on whether the Supreme Court would intrude. For me, gay rights, very simple. No government entity should have the right to ever tell people who to love and who to live with or who to marry. But I think on the issue of abortion rights or the right to life or the right to choose, that's a much more complicated issue. And whether the Supreme Court should have been involved or not is debatable. I don't think the Supreme Court should at this point reverse Roe versus Wade because it's been established law since 1973. And I, by the way, don't think the Supreme Court will reverse Roe versus Wade because it would actually hurt the Republican Party. You play into the hands of the Democrats. The Democrats would win political debates over abortion because most Americans favor a woman's right to choose abortion, at least at the early stages of pregnancy. So these are complicated libertarian issues that we should be debating among each other, but we should be talking to each other about it. You and I disagree about some aspects of it, agree about some aspects of it. That's the way it's
like we are here. It's quite easy. All right, I'm so sorry, Alan. We're up against a hard break. Alan Dershowitz, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we appreciate all of you joining